today, the U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, he's going to be meeting with his Mexican counterpart to see if they can come up with a way to avert the new tariffs the president has threatened. They're going to kick in a week from today. I have the two perfect guests to help me discuss this. Josh Brown, CEO of Ritholtz Management, and Ron Insana, senior analyst for CNBC and a senior advisor to Schroders. Josh, the president tweeted he wants action, not talk. But what exactly can Mexico do? The president, as Chuck Grassley, fellow Republican, said, is conflating national security and immigration issues with trade. And we have to remind our audience the tariffs, it's the U.S. who would be paying them.
Right. Well, this is what's changed. At least explicitly, the Chinese negotiations, the China trade war was about the economy. Fairness for our producers, fairness for our consumers, our technology. They're not even pretending with this. They are. So this is new, and the way Wall Street is processing it, very simply, is panic. So Wall Street is basically saying, if you look at the odds of a rate hike at a rate cut at the next FOMC, now above 50%. So that is startling. We were talking about rate hikes 6 months ago. Okay. So Wall Street is saying, okay, this is crazy. Now we have a situation where 6 million U.S. jobs are directly dependent on cross-border trade between the U.S. and Mexico, and he's willing to put that as a chit on the table, that portion of our economy, to seemingly get the optics of, I'm tough on the border. It has no economic bearing whatsoever. This is a whole other ballgame.
But is it political genius? It was 1 month ago, May 3rd, when USA Today wrote about the April jobs report showing 263,000 jobs, and they added that unemployment is at a 50-year low. The column said it would be hard to ask for a more favorable report. That was 1 month ago. Yep. Now, here we are with the president threatening tariffs against Mexico, and we're talking about a rate cut, which is exactly what the president wants.
Well, yeah, partly, Steph, because these tariffs can be so punitive and they could disrupt the global economic supply chain, particularly with Mexico. Nearly every transmission for every automobile in the United States is somehow subassembled or assembled in Mexico. So if you disrupt that supply chain, you could throw the economy into a recession. And there are.
Ron, he doesn't care if we mock him for a week and say how silly this is.
Understood.
In a week, he could not put the tariffs in place, and we don't get a rate hike, and then he just won the ball game.
You have to have brains made of mashed potatoes to think that a rate cut is preferable to an economic expansion.
There's
no way he thinks that. I don't think he thinks anything very deeply on the subject. However, you're right. He does want the Fed to look and act as though what he says goes. He would like a rate cut. Unfortunately, look at the history of markets. When the rate cut cycle starts, you are not in a good place. Yeah. Economically, you are not in a good place stock market-wise.
And it's an admission from the Fed that somehow, and the bond markets around the world are saying this, that we are headed toward recession, not toward, as Josh said, not towards recovery. Bond markets around the world, $11 trillion of sovereign debt carries negative interest rates. Here in the U.S. this morning, before the market recovered a little bit, we saw the yield on the 10-year Treasury at 2.09%, the lowest level in several years. This is not a strong signal. It's a signal, as Josh said, of panic. People are worried. Now, stock market's bouncing a little bit because it's gotten absolutely crushed in May. So you're going to get a little bounce. There were some headlines saying that China and Mexico may come to the table and start or restart, in China's case, negotiations. But again, this is a dangerous way to weaponize tariffs.
Think about the cognitive dissonance required. Yeah. And maybe this is why Kevin Hassett left. Yeah. Think about this balancing act you have to pull off if you represent the White House on television or in print. You have to say, this is the strongest economy of all time, or in 50 years, or whatever superlative you want to invent.
Since that portrait of George Washington.
Right, yeah. And this is why we require emergency policy from the Federal Reserve.
Okay, I'm with you. So they have to stand up there, and it's an absolute game of buffoonery, and they have to defend this new story that the president was potentially considering tariffs against Australia.
And India, for that matter.
But at the end of the day, do investors actually care what anybody is saying on the White House lawn, or care about the president's rhetoric if they get what they're ultimately looking for, which is some sort of tough negotiation with China and maybe a rate cut?
Well, first of all, there's no immediate solution to the China problem. In addition to what Josh said about this, at least on the surface appearing to be economically driven, there are foreign policy aspects of trade relations with China where they're using tariffs as a lever to get internal changes in China that would affect their military capabilities down the road. All the technologies in question, 5G, autonomous vehicles, have military usage in the future. They're worried both about China economically and militarily as an existential threat to the United States. That's not going to be resolved in a simple exchange over tariffs.
Trade wars are easy to win.
Sassy.
Can I bring up one other point, though?
Please.
And this is one that I think, and I don't understand. The White House keeps saying it wants to create jobs. There are 7.5 million open jobs in the United States. There are 6.3 million unemployed people. If you filled every job that's open, you would still have a population or labor force deficit of 1.2 million people. This is where immigration policy is going wrong. We have a shortage of agricultural workers, construction workers. There are 300,000 open cyber jobs. There are trucking jobs going wanting. I mean, it's a backwards policy. We don't need to create jobs. We need to fill them. And so at the end of the day, if you're going to shut down the economy, yeah, you might get the unemployment rate to go up a little bit, but it's not, whatever it is, whatever the result is, it's not positive.
I got to ask you about the president's tweet this morning going after CNN and in turn AT&T, where he writes, I believe that if people stopped using or subscribing to AT&T, they would be forced to make big changes at CNN, which is dying in the ratings anyway. It is so unfair with such bad fake news. Why wouldn't they act? When the world watches CNN, it gets a false picture of USA. Sad.
He's not serious. He doesn't think that people have their cellular service from AT&T because they approve of what CNN puts on during prime time.
But
nobody thinks that.
AT&T is a publicly traded company.
Right.
They've got massive M&A ahead of them. At some point, does the SEC say, hold on a second,
well,
you have a president with market-moving tweets that impact like none of this matters?
We may find out years from now that people within the administration maybe took advantage of the timing of some of these tweets, but that's only speculation. There's no way to know for sure that any of that is happening. I would just say we've had scandals where the president's been involved in specifically, or the president's cabinet has specifically been involved in big business. Teapot Dome comes to mind.
Elaine Chao's on the front page of the New York Times.
But people would resign before charges. It was like a disgrace. Now it's like, you know, what can we get away with? What is actually a norm versus a law? And who cares about the norms anymore? That's a new world. I don't think that this is going to go anywhere.
Real quick on that, though. I mean, the president says positive things about the U.S. market when the U.S. market's open. He says negative things about China when the Chinese market is open. So one does have to wonder how much his tweets are purposefully designed to affect market movements. And I think if anybody's going to look into anything, that's certainly worthwhile.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.